The bell above the repair shop door gave a weak chime as someone stumbled inside. Ethan Brooks glanced up from his workbench, his hands covered in grease and oil. What he saw made him freeze completely. A small child stood in the doorway, trembling from head to toe. She couldn't have been more than 8 years old, but everything about her screamed alien. Her skin was a soft violet color, and her eyes glowed golden like twin suns. She wore a tattered brown cloak that had seen better days, and dried tears marked her cheeks. But what really caught Ethan's attention was what she carried in her arms. An android. Or what was left of one. The machine's sleek silver frame was crushed and mangled, like something massive had stepped on it. Exposed wires sparked weakly and entire sections of plating hung loose. The child held it like a dying pet, her arms wrapped around it protectively despite the sharp edges cutting into her skin. "Please," she whispered, her voice cracking with desperation. "Can you fix her?" Ethan set down his plasma wrench and wiped his hands on a rag that was probably dirtier than his hands. He walked over slowly, not wanting to scare her. Dust Haven wasn't the kind of place where rich aliens showed up with expensive technology. This kid was clearly running from something bad. He knelt down to examine the android more closely, letting out a low whistle when he saw the extent of the damage. This wasn't an accident. Something had deliberately tried to destroy this machine. Blast marks scored the metal. Impact craters suggested weapon fire. "This is real bad, kid," he said gently. "The kind of bad that costs serious money to fix. Parts, labor, specialized tools. I'm talking more credits than most folks on this planet see in a year." The girl's face crumpled, fresh tears welling in those strange golden eyes. Her hands shook as she reached into her cloak and pulled out something small. A crystalline chip, no bigger than her thumbnail, glowing with faint internal light. "I have this," she said, holding it up with trembling fingers. "Is it enough?" Ethan recognized data storage when he saw it, but this was unlike any tech he'd worked with before. Advanced stuff. Military grade, maybe. But looking at her desperate face, at the way she clutched that broken android like it was the most important thing in the universe, he felt something twist painfully in his chest. It was a feeling he'd buried 3 years ago. The night the raiders came. The night they took everything from him. He pushed the memory away and stood up, making his decision. "Come back tomorrow morning," he said quietly. "I'll see what I can do." Her eyes went wide, hope flooding across her face so pure and bright it actually hurt to see. "Really? You mean it? You'll really try?" "Yeah, kid. I mean it." She smiled then, just for a moment, before turning and disappearing into the dusty streets of the colony. Ethan watched her go, then looked down at the ruined android on his counter. What had he just agreed to? He locked the shop door and carried the android to his main workbench, setting it down under the bright overhead lights. When he started removing the damaged outer plating, his breath caught in his throat. The internal architecture was incredible. Beautiful even. Crystalline processors pulsed with soft bioluminescent light, like tiny stars captured inside circuitry. The neural pathways were woven together with a precision he'd never seen, not even in top-tier military hardware. And the emotion subroutines, the systems that let an android feel and respond and care, they were integrated at a level that shouldn't have been possible with current technology. Someone hadn't just built this android. They'd crafted it. Poured their heart into every connection, every line of code. This machine was meant to be a companion, a friend. Maybe even family. Ethan felt his hands start to shake. He remembered building toys for his daughter once, years ago. Staying up late in their tiny apartment, trying to create something that would make her smile despite their hard life on the frontier. She'd never asked for much. Just wanted him to be there, to play with her, to listen when she talked about her day. He shook his head hard, forcing the memories back into their locked box. That was the past. The past was dead and buried. He got to work. Hours blurred together as Ethan lost himself in the repair. He pulled parts from a dozen junked machines scattered around his shop, fabricating custom connectors when nothing fit quite right. His fingers moved with the practiced precision of 20 years working on the frontier, but also with something else. Something he hadn't felt in a long time. He cared about getting this right. The emotion subroutines were the trickiest part. One wrong connection and the android would lose everything that made it more than just a fancy computer. He worked with the delicate touch of a surgeon, rerouting damaged pathways, bridging gaps with salvaged neural mesh, testing each connection before moving to the next. Dawn light started creeping through the grimy windows of his shop. Ethan's back ached from hunching over the workbench all night. His eyes burned with exhaustion. Coffee cups littered the floor around him. But the android was ready. He took a deep breath and initiated the final power sequence. For a moment nothing happened. Then the crystalline processors began to glow, soft at first, then brighter. The android's chest plate hummed with energy. Its fingers twitched. And then its eyes opened, blazing to life with warm amber light. "Systems restored," it said, its voice melodic and clear. "Running diagnostics. Motor functions optimal. Memory core intact. Emotional matrix functioning within normal parameters." Ethan let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. It worked. It actually worked. The android sat up smoothly, its movements graceful despite the patchwork repairs visible across its frame. Its head turned, scanning the unfamiliar workshop with obvious confusion. "Identifying location," it continued. "Unknown. Not recognized in database. Searching for primary user. Searching for Princess Lyria." Ethan's heart stuttered. "Princess?" The android's eyes fixed on him, and something in its expression shifted. Urgency flooded its features. "Alert status critical. We must reach the designated safe house before Imperial forces locate us. Princess Lyria is in danger. Where is she? I must protect her immediately." Ethan stood there, grease-stained and exhausted, staring at the android he'd just spent all night repairing, and felt the cold weight of realization settle into his gut. What the hell had he just gotten himself into? The android sat upright on the workbench, its amber eyes glowing brighter as it processed its surroundings. Ethan grabbed the edge of the table to steady himself, his exhausted mind trying to catch up with what he'd just heard. "Princess?" he repeated slowly, his voice hoarse from lack of sleep. "Did you just say princess?" Before the android could answer, the shop door burst open with enough force to make the bell clatter wildly. The violet-skinned girl rushed inside, her golden eyes immediately locking onto her companion. Her entire face transformed with joy so pure and overwhelming that it seemed to light up the dingy workshop. "Sage!" she cried out, racing across the room. She threw her small arms around the android's torso, squeezing tight despite the sharp edges of its patchwork repairs. Tears streamed down her cheeks, but these were happy tears, relief and gratitude mixing together as she pressed her face against the cool metal. Then she turned to Ethan, and before he could react, she was hugging him too. Her head barely reached his waist, but her grip was fierce and grateful. "Thank you," she sobbed into his shirt. "Thank you so much. You saved her. You're a hero. A real hero." Ethan stood there awkwardly, his hands hovering in the air, not quite sure what to do. He wasn't used to being thanked. Wasn't used to being called a hero. On Dust Haven you kept your head down and minded your own business if you wanted to survive. But this kid's genuine gratitude was breaking through walls he'd built around himself for years. "Kid, listen," he said, gently extracting himself from her embrace. "I need you to explain something to me. Your android here, Sage, she called you a princess. What's that about?" The girl, Lyria, exchanged a quick glance with Sage. Something passed between them, some silent communication. When she looked back at Ethan, her expression had turned guarded. "It's complicated," she said quietly. "I've got time," Ethan replied, crossing his arms. "In fact, I've got all the time in the world until you explain why I just spent all night fixing military-grade technology for someone being hunted by people who use the word princess." "We do not have time," Sage interrupted smoothly, standing up from the workbench with fluid grace. "This location may be compromised. Princess, we must depart immediately and continue toward the extraction point." "Not so fast," Ethan stepped in front of the door. "Nobody's going anywhere until I get some answers." "Who are you running from?" Lyria's golden eyes dropped to the floor. Her small hands twisted together nervously. "Bad people. Really bad people. They want to hurt me." "What? What did you do?" "I didn't do anything," she whispered. "I was just born." The pain in her voice made Ethan's chest tighten. He'd heard that kind of hurt before. The kind that came from circumstances you couldn't control, from a world that decided your fate before you had any say in it. His expression softened. "All right. Look, you can stay here today. Both of you. But tonight we figure out a real plan. Deal?" Lyria's face lit up again, that incredible smile breaking through like sunshine. "Deal?" Throughout the morning, Lyria explored Ethan's workshop with the kind of curiosity that reminded him painfully of better days. She touched everything, asked questions about every tool and half-finished project scattered across his workspace. Her intelligence was startling. She understood complex mechanical concepts after a single explanation, made connections between systems that took most adults years to grasp. Sage remained in the corner, silent but watchful. Those amber eyes tracked every movement Ethan made, every word he spoke. It was unnerving, like being studied by something that could calculate 1,000 outcomes before he finished a single thought. What's this do? Lyria held up a plasma cutter, mercifully switched off. That cuts through metal, Ethan said quickly, taking it from her hands. Very hot. Very dangerous. Don't touch. She giggled. My mother would never let me near her workshops. She says I'd break something important. But you let me look at everything. Your mother sounds strict. She is, Lyria said, her voice going quiet. She always says kindness is weakness. That caring about people makes you vulnerable. But you're kind and you fixed what all her best engineers couldn't. So I think she's wrong. Before Ethan could process that strange statement, before he could ask what kind of mother had access to engineers that couldn't fix what a frontier mechanic could, the shop door slammed open again. 3 men filled the doorway. They were the kind of rough that Dust Haven specialized in, all scars and cheap weapons and eyes that had seen too much violence. The leader grinned with yellowed teeth, leveling a plasma pistol directly at Lyria. Well, he drawled. Heard there's a fat reward for an alien brat with golden eyes. Big enough to buy a ship and get off this miserable rock. Ethan's blood turned to ice. His heart hammered against his ribs. He'd never been a fighter. Never been brave. He was just a mechanic who kept his head down and survived. But looking at Lyria's terrified face, something primal awakened in his chest. Get away from her, he heard himself say. The thug laughed. Old man, you really want to die for some alien kid you just met? Ethan didn't answer with words. His hand shot out and grabbed a heavy pneumatic wrench from his workbench. In one smooth motion, he hurled it at the overhead light fixture. The room plunged into darkness as glass shattered and sparks rained down. Sage, he shouted. Get her to the back room now. Plasma bolts lit up the darkness like lightning, scorching the air where Ethan had been standing a second before. He dove behind his workbench, his mind racing faster than it had in years. This was his shop. His territory. He knew every corner, every tool, every trap. He triggered the emergency locks he'd installed after the last robbery attempt. Heavy metal shutters slammed down over the windows. He hit the release valve on the compressed air tanks, and suddenly the room filled with a deafening hiss and white fog as pressurized gas exploded outward. The thugs shouted in confusion, firing blindly. Ethan moved through the chaos like a ghost, using sound and memory to navigate. He grabbed industrial cable from a shelf, looped it around support beams, created tripwires at ankle height. One thug went down hard, cursing as he hit the concrete floor. Ethan was on him in a second, using a magnetic clamp to pin the man's weapon hand to a metal workbench. The second thug spun around, but Ethan had already activated the overhead crane. A half-ton engine block swung out of the darkness and caught the man in the chest, sending him flying into a wall. The leader was smarter. He backed toward the door, weapon sweeping in arcs. But he'd forgotten about Sage. The android emerged from the shadows with inhuman speed. One precise strike to the wrist and the plasma pistol clattered to the floor. Another strike and the thug crumpled, unconscious before he hit the ground. When Ethan managed to get the lights back on, his hands were shaking so badly he could barely hold the wrench he'd picked up as a weapon. The 3 thugs lay unconscious, wrapped in industrial cable and maglocked to various pieces of equipment. Lyria emerged slowly from the back room, her eyes wide with shock and awe. You saved me, she whispered. You really saved me. Ethan slumped against his workbench, adrenaline draining away and leaving him weak. Are you okay? Did they hurt you? She shook her head, then rushed forward and hugged him again. This time Ethan hugged her back. Sage's eyes glowed brighter as the android studied him with something that might have been respect. You care for her already. Despite knowing nothing about her circumstances. Despite the obvious danger. How very unexpected. Yeah, well, Ethan muttered. I'm full of surprises. That night, after they'd secured the unconscious thugs and called the local security force, after Lyria had finally fallen asleep curled up in his office chair, Sage approached Ethan where he sat nursing a bruised shoulder and examining his trembling hands. She trusts you, the android said quietly, its melodic voice barely above a whisper. Completely. Without reservation. I have calculated a 73% probability that you will betray her when you discover who she truly is and what forces are pursuing her. I hope, for her sake, that you prove my calculations wrong. Ethan looked up, meeting those glowing amber eyes. I'm not going to betray a scared kid. I don't care who she is. We shall see, Sage replied. Before Ethan could respond, before he could demand real answers about what he'd gotten himself into, emergency sirens began wailing across the colony. The sound was deafening, a rising and falling scream that meant only one thing: invasion. Ethan rushed to his grimy window and looked up at the night sky. His stomach dropped. Massive Imperial warships were descending through the atmosphere, their hulls so large they blocked out the stars. Dozens of them. Maybe hundreds. Dropships were already detaching, screaming toward the surface like birds of prey. "Oh no," Sage whispered behind him, and for the first time, the android's voice carried something that sounded like fear. "They found us." Ethan scooped Lyria into his arms as she jolted awake from the screaming sirens. Her small hand immediately gripped his shirt with desperate strength, her golden eyes wide with confusion and fear. "What's happening?" she asked, her voice thick with sleep. "Why are the alarms going off?" "Imperial dropships," Sage reported, already moving toward the door with mechanical precision. "Multiple battalions conducting atmospheric entry. Sensor readings indicate sector-wide sweep patterns. They are searching for something specific." Ethan's mind raced through his limited options. The streets would be crawling with soldiers within minutes. His shop had a back exit, but that would only buy them seconds. Then he remembered something from his early days on Dust Haven, back when he'd first arrived as a young man looking for work in the mining operations. The old tunnels. The abandoned mining shafts beneath the colony that most people had forgotten about. "Follow me," he said, adjusting Lyria in his arms. "Stay close and stay quiet." He led them through his cluttered storage room, shoving aside boxes of spare parts and old equipment until he found what he was looking for. A rusted metal grate set into the floor, barely visible under years of accumulated dust and grime. He hadn't opened it in over a decade. Ethan grabbed a crowbar and pried at the edges. The grate resisted, corroded shut by time and neglect. His muscles strained as he leveraged his full weight against it. Finally, with a screech of protesting metal, it came free. Below was darkness and the smell of damp stone mixed with old machinery oil. "Down there?" Lyria whispered. "It's safer than up here. Trust me." They descended into the tunnels using a ladder that felt dangerously weak under their weight. Behind them, even through the thick walls and earth, Ethan could hear the sounds of the invasion. Shouting. Doors being kicked in. Plasma fire. Screams that made his blood run cold. The systematic destruction of his neighborhood. Sage's eyes provided the only light as they moved through the pitch-black passages. The android led the way, its sensors mapping the ancient tunnels with precision. Ethan followed, one hand on Lyria's shoulder, the other trailing along the rough stone wall to keep his bearings. They ran for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. Behind them, the sounds of violence echoed through the tunnel system. Plasma fire scorched the air above ground. Something exploded, shaking dust and small rocks loose from the ceiling. "They're destroying everything," Lyria whimpered. "They're hurting people just to find me." Finally, Sage stopped at an intersection where several tunnels converged. "This location provides optimal defensive positioning," the android announced. "We should hold here temporarily." Ethan set Lyria down carefully. The small chamber they'd found themselves in was an old mining shaft, probably abandoned when the veins ran dry 30 years ago. Support beams crisscrossed overhead, and ancient equipment rusted in the corners. Lyria was breathing hard, her violet skin pale with exhaustion and fear. Her golden eyes were fixed upward, toward the ceiling, toward the world above where people were suffering. "They're hurting people because of me," she said, her voice barely a whisper. Tears started streaming down her face. "People who don't even know who I am. People who never did anything wrong. The whole colony is going to suffer and it's all my fault." Ethan knelt beside her, placing a gentle hand on her trembling shoulder. "Hey, listen to me. This is not your fault." "It is," she sobbed, her small body shaking. "My mother is Empress Kalira. She conquered half the galaxy. Everyone fears her. Everyone obeys her. And I ran away because I was scared. Scared of becoming like her. Cold and cruel and seeing people as nothing but tools to use. But now she's destroying this whole place just to find me. So many people are going to die because I was selfish." The name hit Ethan like a physical punch to the gut. Empress Kalira. Every person in the outer colonies knew that name. They whispered it in fear. She was the woman who'd built the Galactic Empire through brilliant strategy and absolutely ruthless enforcement. They said she'd personally ordered the execution of her own husband when he'd questioned her judgment in front of the council. They said entire species had been brought to heel under her rule, their worlds absorbed into her growing empire whether they wanted it or not. They said she was the most dangerous person alive because she combined genius-level intelligence with a complete willingness to do whatever it took to achieve her goals. And this terrified little girl crying in a dark tunnel was her daughter. Her heir. Every survival instinct Ethan had screamed at him to surrender Lyria right now. Turn her over, save the colony, save himself. It would be the logical choice. The smart choice. Thousands of lives against one child who'd run away from home. But looking at Lyria's tear-stained face, at the genuine anguish in her eyes over the suffering of strangers, he saw something her mother apparently lacked. He saw compassion. Real compassion. The kind that couldn't be faked or calculated. Listen to me carefully, Ethan said firmly, tilting her chin up so she had to meet his eyes. Your mother doesn't define who you are. You understand me? You get to choose what kind of person you become. And right now, in this moment, you're choosing to care about these people. You're feeling pain because others are hurting. That's not weakness, no matter what your mother told you. That's strength. That's being human. Lyria threw her arms around him, burying her face in his shoulder and soaking his shirt with tears. Sage interrupted softly from where the android stood guard. Ethan Brooks, I must inform you of tactical updates. Imperial troops are conducting systematic house-to-house searches in a grid pattern. Execution squads are being deployed to neighborhoods that resist. Based on extensive historical data regarding Empress Kalira's military operations, she will reduce this entire colony to ash if she deems it necessary to achieve her objective. The weight of that statement settled over Ethan like a physical burden. Thousands of lives, families, children, all balanced against this one scared little girl. Before he could formulate any kind of response, before he could even begin to process the impossible choice in front of him, every screen in the tunnel flickered to life. Old monitors that the miners had left behind, forgotten and covered in dust, suddenly blazed with light. An emergency broadcast. Override codes that could hijack any display device in the colony. A face appeared on every screen. A woman's face. Beautiful in the way that predators are beautiful, elegant and perfect and absolutely terrifying. Dark skin that seemed to absorb light. Golden eyes identical to Lyria's but burning with an intensity that made Ethan's breath catch. She wore robes that probably cost more than his entire shop, and she radiated power like a physical force. Empress Kalira. Citizens of Dust Haven, she said, her voice like silk wrapped around steel. Every word was precisely articulated, commanding absolute attention. My daughter was taken from me. She is young, frightened, and vulnerable. I want her returned safely. Pause. Those golden eyes seemed to look directly through the screen, directly at every person watching. I am offering amnesty to your entire colony. Full pardons for any crimes. Imperial protection status. And wealth beyond your imagination. Enough credits to transform this dust ball into a paradise. All I ask is the safe return of my child. Another pause. The temperature in the tunnel seemed to drop. You have 6 hours to comply. A countdown appeared on every screen, numbers glowing red against black. 5 hours, 59 minutes, 58 seconds. 57. 56. After that time expires, Kalira continued, her voice never rising but somehow becoming even more menacing, I will demonstrate why defying me is the worst decision anyone can make. I will show you what happens to those who stand between me and what is mine. 6 hours. Choose wisely. The screens went dark. Ethan stared at the blank monitors, then down at Lyria trembling in his arms. The countdown was burned into his vision. 5 hours and 59 minutes until an entire colony faced annihilation. Thousands of innocent lives against one child's freedom. He'd never felt the weight of an impossible choice pressing down on his shoulders quite like this before. And he had no idea what the right answer was. Ethan watched the countdown numbers tick away in his mind as Lyria finally cried herself into an exhausted sleep against his side. Her small chest rose and fell with the deep breathing of someone pushed far beyond their limits. Sage stood motionless a few feet away, those amber eyes fixed on him with an intensity that suggested the android was running countless calculations. The silence in the tunnel was suffocating. Above them, he could still hear the occasional burst of plasma fire, the rumble of Imperial machinery moving through the streets. His colony was being occupied, searched, torn apart piece by piece. I'm going to turn myself in, Ethan said quietly, careful not to wake Lyria. I'll tell them I kidnapped her. That I forced her to hide with me. Threatened her. Whatever story they need to hear. It'll give you time to get off-world before they figure out the truth. Negative, Sage responded immediately, its voice flat and mechanical. I have run 17,000 different scenario projections based on available data regarding Empress Kalira's psychological profile and historical patterns. Probability of your execution following such a confession. 97.3%. The Empress does not forgive perceived threats to her daughter's safety. She eliminates them. I'm not asking for your permission, Ethan said, his jaw set. I'm telling you what's happening. You're the one with military-grade sensors and navigation systems. You can get her somewhere safe. Why? Sage tilted its head in that unsettling way androids had. You owe this child nothing. You met her yesterday. This course of action is completely illogical from a survival standpoint. Ethan looked down at Lyria's sleeping face, so peaceful despite everything happening around them. His throat tightened with an old, familiar pain. I had a daughter once, he said softly. About her age. Maybe a year younger. Her name was Rebecca. He paused, the words catching in his throat. He hadn't said her name out loud in 3 years. Raiders hit our settlement. I was working late at the community workshop, trying to finish a toy I was building for her birthday. By the time I got home. He stopped, swallowed hard. I couldn't protect her when it mattered. Couldn't save her. Maybe I can save this one. Sage was silent for a long moment. Your emotional reasoning is not logical, but I am beginning to understand it. Ethan pulled out his battered personal data pad and started recording a message. His hands shook slightly as he found the words. He talked about being brave even when you're scared. About choosing kindness even when the world makes it hard. About how proud he was of Lyria even though he'd known her less than 2 days. About how she should never stop caring about people, no matter what her mother or anyone else told her. He was halfway through when small hands suddenly grabbed his arm. Lyria stared at him with those piercing golden eyes, swollen from crying but absolutely clear and focused. You were going to die for me. It wasn't a question. Kid, listen. No. She stood up, and despite her small size, despite her tear-stained face and trembling hands, something in her bearing suddenly changed. Her spine straightened. Her chin lifted. She looked less like a frightened child and more like something else entirely. Royalty. I won't let you sacrifice yourself, she said, her voice steady and clear. I'm going back to my mother. Lyria, you don't understand what she'll do to you. She'll lock you up, control every aspect of your life. I understand perfectly. That iron will show through even stronger. But I'm going to ask her for something. I'm going to ask that she spare this colony because you showed me what real goodness looks like. Maybe she'll listen. Maybe she won't. But I have to try. Ethan started to argue, started to explain all the reasons why this was a terrible idea, but the set of her jaw stopped him cold. In that moment she looked exactly like her mother. That same unmovable determination, just pointed in a completely different direction. Then I'm coming with you, he said finally. That is highly inadvisable, Sage interjected. The risk to your life increases exponentially. Don't care. She's not facing her mother alone. Lyria looked up at him, and something in her expression softened. Thank you, she whispered. They made their way back through the tunnels, Sage leading them along a different route that emerged near the colony's central plaza. When they climbed back to the surface, the destruction was worse than Ethan had imagined. Buildings bore scorch marks from plasma weapons. Imperial soldiers stood on every corner, their armor gleaming and weapons ready. Surveillance drones buzzed overhead like mechanical insects. The few colonists still on the streets moved quickly, heads down, avoiding eye contact with the occupying forces. Fear hung in the air like smoke. Ethan held Lyria's hand as they walked toward the central landing zone. Every step felt heavy, final. The massive Imperial command ship dominated the skyline, blocking out the twin suns and casting the entire area in shadow. It was the largest vessel Ethan had ever seen, easily the size of several city blocks. Imperial guards spotted them immediately. Within seconds they were surrounded by soldiers in advanced combat armor, weapons trained on Ethan's head from a dozen different angles. Red targeting lasers painted dots across his chest. Stand down, Lyria commanded, her voice ringing out with sudden authority that seemed impossible from someone so small. This human is under my personal protection. Lower your weapons immediately. The soldiers hesitated, clearly confused. Their targeting systems had flagged Ethan as a potential threat, but this child was giving them direct orders with the tone of someone used to being obeyed. Slowly, reluctantly, the weapons lowered slightly. The command ship's massive landing ramp began to descend with a hydraulic hiss that echoed across the plaza. Every head turned to watch. The ramp hit the ground with a heavy thud that Ethan felt through his boots. And then she appeared. Empress Kalira descended the ramp like judgment itself taking physical form. She was tall, elegant, her dark skin seeming to absorb the light around her. Her robes flowed around her with impossible grace, clearly made from materials that didn't exist on frontier worlds. But it was her presence that truly commanded attention, a weight of authority that made everyone in the plaza want to kneel without even understanding why. Her golden eyes swept across the scene with calculated precision. She took in her disheveled daughter. The grease-stained human mechanic standing protectively beside her. The loyal android positioned to guard them both. Her face revealed nothing, but Ethan could feel the fury radiating from her like heat from a furnace. When she spoke, her voice could have frozen stars solid. Explain. The single word carried the weight of absolute command. Explain why my daughter, the heir to the Galactic Empire, fled from everything I built for her. Explain why she now defends the nobody who harbored her from my forces. Explain why I should not reduce this entire colony to dust for this insult. The countdown on every screen hit 5 hours exactly. Ethan felt every eye in the plaza turn toward him. Felt the weight of thousands of lives resting on whatever words came out of his mouth next. Felt the absolute certainty that one wrong syllable would doom them all. He met the Empress's burning gaze and refused to look away. This was it. The moment that would decide everything. Ethan had faced down armed thugs just yesterday. He'd survived the raid that took his daughter 3 years ago. He'd lived through poverty, loss, and the endless grind of frontier life. But standing before Empress Kalira, he felt the full crushing weight of her power pressing down on him like a physical force trying to drive him to his knees. Every instinct screamed at him to bow, to beg, to grovel for mercy. Instead, he stood straight and met her burning golden gaze with his own tired, grease-stained face. Your daughter ran because she was lonely, he said, his voice steady despite his racing heart. She wanted to be loved, not obeyed. There's a difference. A ripple of shock went through the assembled Imperial soldiers. Nobody spoke to the Empress like this. Nobody contradicted her. Ethan could see hands moving toward weapons, officers tensing for the order to execute him on the spot. Kalira's eyes narrowed dangerously, her perfect composure showing the first crack of anger. You dare lecture me about my own child? You, a frontier mechanic who knows nothing of what it takes to rule, to protect, to build an empire that spans star systems. I know what it takes to be a parent, Ethan replied quietly. And that's what she needed. Not an empress. A mom. Before Kalira could respond, before the situation could explode into violence, Lyria stepped directly between them. Her small frame seemed impossibly fragile standing between two adults, but her voice rang out clear and strong. Mother, please listen, she said. Just listen for 1 minute. Kalira's gaze dropped to her daughter, and for just a moment, something flickered across her face. Relief maybe. Or pain. It was gone so quickly Ethan almost thought he'd imagined it. My android was broken, Lyria continued, gesturing to Sage. You remember her. The companion you had built for me by the Empire's best engineers. She was destroyed protecting me when we ran. Her core was crushed. Her processors were shattered. Everyone said she couldn't be fixed. She turned to look at Ethan, her golden eyes shining. This man worked all night. He didn't ask for payment. He didn't know who I was. He just saw someone who needed help and he helped. Because that's what good people do. Lyria's voice grew stronger, more confident. Then when bad people came for me, people who wanted the reward you offered, he fought them. He's not a soldier. He's not trained. But he protected me anyway. He hid me from your troops even though it meant his whole colony would suffer. And just now, in those tunnels, he was ready to turn himself in and claim he kidnapped me. Ready to die so I could escape. She turned back to face her mother fully. When was the last time someone helped you without wanting something in return? When was the last time someone just cared about you, not about your power or your empire or what you could do for them? The plaza had gone completely silent. Every soldier, every colonist, every person within earshot held their breath. This wasn't the kind of conversation that happened in public. This was intimate, painful, raw. Kalira's perfect mask cracked further. Her hands, which had been clasped regally behind her back, trembled slightly. I built you an empire, she said, and for the first time her voice carried emotion. Confusion. I gave you everything. Wealth beyond measure. Protection. Power. A future where you would never know want or fear or suffering. I conquered worlds to secure your inheritance. I don't need an empire, Lyria whispered, tears starting to stream down her face again. I don't need wealth or power. I just need my mother. I need someone who hugs me when I'm scared. Someone who listens when I talk about my day. Someone who cares about me, not about the heir I'm supposed to become. Her voice broke. I ran away because I was so lonely, Mother. So lonely I couldn't breathe. And you never even noticed. The words hit Kalira like physical blows. Ethan watched the most powerful woman in the galaxy stand there, her daughter's pain finally breaking through decades of carefully constructed armor. Then Ethan did something completely insane. He spoke directly to an empress who could order his death with a single word. "You can conquer 1,000 worlds," he said quietly. "You can command fleets and armies and bend entire civilizations to your will. But you can't force someone to love the person you're becoming. Your daughter doesn't need your empire. She doesn't need your protection or your wealth. She just needs you to be present. To see her. To care about what she feels, not just what she represents." Every weapon in the plaza immediately trained on him. Targeting lasers painted red dots across his chest and head. Officers shouted orders. But Kalira raised one hand and everything stopped. She stared at Ethan for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she did something that visibly shocked every person who knew her. She knelt. The Empress of the known galaxy, the woman who had never shown weakness, who had never bent to anyone or anything, knelt in the dust before her daughter. "Teach me," Kalira said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Please. Teach me what I've forgotten. Show me how to be what you need." Lyria's eyes went wide with disbelief. Then she launched herself into her mother's arms, and the Empress, this woman who ruled through calculated strategy and ruthless enforcement, held her daughter and wept openly. The sound of her crying was almost shocking in its rawness. These weren't the controlled tears of political manipulation. This was genuine grief, years of buried emotion finally breaking free. Mother and daughter held each other in the middle of an occupied colony plaza while soldiers and civilians alike watched in stunned silence. Ethan felt his own eyes burning, his throat tight. Kalira finally pulled back, cupping Lyria's face in her hands. "I thought I was protecting you by being strong. By never showing weakness. By building something so powerful that nothing could ever hurt you. You were protecting the Empire," Lyria said gently. "Not me. I see that now." Kalira stood, still holding her daughter's hand, and turned to address the assembled forces. Her voice carried the full weight of imperial authority. "Cancel the occupation. All forces will withdraw immediately. This colony is hereby granted protectorate status under my personal seal. They will receive funding, protection, and full autonomy in their governance." Officers scrambled to relay orders. The change was immediate and dramatic. Then Kalira turned to Ethan. She studied him for a long moment, this grease-stained mechanic who'd somehow changed the course of her empire. "You gave me back my daughter," she said. "That is a debt beyond measure. Name your reward. Anything within my power to grant." Ethan thought about it. He could ask for wealth. For status. For a new life away from Dust Haven's dust and poverty. But looking at Lyria's hopeful face, he knew what mattered. "Just visit her sometimes," he said quietly. "Not as an empress reviewing her heir. As a mother spending time with her daughter. That's all." Kalira's lips curved in something that might have been a smile, rusty and uncertain but real. "That is acceptable." 3 months later, Ethan stood in front of the newly opened Dust Haven Children's Center. The building was beautiful, funded by an anonymous imperial benefactor, equipped with medical facilities that rivaled anything on the core worlds. But what he was most proud of were the companion androids he'd designed. Each one was built with the same care he'd put into repairing Sage. They encouraged creativity, kindness, curiosity. They asked questions and actually listened to the answers. They were what every child deserved. Children played in the courtyard, their laughter echoing off walls that had seen too much hardship for too long. Human kids, alien kids from a dozen different species, all together without fear or prejudice. A familiar Imperial ship descended into the landing area. This one was smaller, more personal. Lyria bounded down the ramp and crashed into Ethan with a hug that nearly knocked him over. "Ethan. Look, I grew 2 inches. And I've been learning engineering from Mother's best teachers, but I told them your techniques are better." Behind her, moving with more grace but less rigidity than before, came Kalira. She changed too. She still carried herself with authority, but something in her face was softer now. "The facility is impressive," Kalira said, examining the building with an engineer's eye. "Your android designs are being implemented across medical facilities in 6 sectors. The emotional response algorithms are revolutionary." "Just trying to help some kids," Ethan said with a shrug. Kalira studied him seriously. "The reward I offered initially still stands. Enough wealth to purchase your own world. I always honor my debts." Ethan shook his head. "I've got everything I need right here." As Lyria dragged them both toward the courtyard to show off the gardens she'd helped design, chattering excitedly about flowers from 12 different planets and a fountain that created rainbow mist. Sage walked beside Ethan. "You proved my calculations wrong," the android said quietly. "Humanity's capacity for compassion remains incalculable. I find that comforting." That evening, after Lyria and Kalira departed, Ethan returned to his apartment above the repair shop. A package waited on his doorstep, bearing the Imperial seal. Inside was a holographic projector. He activated it, and Lyria's face appeared, laughing as she showed him a drawing she'd made, told him about her day, asked when he'd visit the capital to see the new children's hospital wing they were building there. In the background, barely visible, Kalira sat listening to her daughter with the expression of someone learning a language they'd forgotten long ago. Ethan smiled genuinely for the first time in 3 years and began recording his reply. Outside his window, Dust Haven thrived. Protected, funded, free. A reminder that even in a galaxy ruled by power, sometimes the smallest acts of kindness could reshape everything. And sometimes, fixing one broken android could change an empire.